Welcome to Sonar Go Deeper. I'm Seth Pearlstein with Cakewalk, and it's time to get hands-on and go deeper with PX-64 Percussion Strip. PX-64's Transient shaper sculpts the attacks and decays of audio. Increasing the attack adds punch to a kick drum, while decreasing the attack gives it a softer feel. Increasing the decay transients really brings out the room in the kick drum, while decreasing the decay makes it sound tighter. The color control acts like a shelving EQ on the transients. Now I've got a brighter decay and a brighter attack. And now I've got a darker, more muffled sounding kick. Increasing the weight control will fatten or thicken the kick, while decreasing the weight will thin or tighten the sound. Increasing the attack transient on a snare drum gives it more snap, while decreasing the attack transient on a snare can make it sound like it was brushed. Boosting the decay brings out that room tone, while cutting the decay makes the snare sound much, much tighter. Brightening the transients brings out the sizzle and rattle of the snare. Darkening the transients gives it a warmer, deeper tone. And mixing in a little of both can also give good results. Finally, the weight control thickens or thins out the snare. Ratio and threshold are the only controls you have to worry about in PX-64's compressor. For more aggressive compression, turn the ratio higher. For gentler compression, turn it lower. To adjust the amount of compression, turn the threshold to the right for less compression, and turn it to the left for more compression. All of the compressor's other controls, like attack, knee, and makeup gain, are going on automatically under the hood and are custom tuned for drums. Of course, the more you compress, the more ambience you're going to bring out in the audio, and that's when the expander comes in really handy. The expander's ratio acts like a decay envelope and becomes a hard gate when turned all the way up. The threshold determines how fast or slow the expander kicks in, so turning it to the right really cuts off those decay tails. Compression followed by expansion is also a great way to treat toms. First, I'll dial in my compression ratio. Then find the sweet spot on the threshold for a modest amount of compression. These toms have a natural ring to them, and the compressor only brings that out. So I'll dial in the expander to help with that problem. I'm going to set the ratio fairly high and dial in the threshold until I get a very tight, dampened kind of sound. Now it's time to work with the 4-band EQ on the kick drum. I'm going to leave the low band as a shelf and dial in the frequency to around 60 Hz and give it a little boost for some low-end thump. The low mid-band is a bell curve, which has classic and vintage quality modes, so I'll give it a boost and sweep around for some low-mid thud, and then give that a cut by about 6 dB or so. Classic mode uses a narrow quality setting, which is typically good for cutting, while vintage mode uses a wider quality setting, which is typically better for boosting. The high mid-band is great for finding that upper mid clickiness or nasalness in a drum sound and pulling it out. So I'm going to set this to around 2.5 K and cut by about 6 dB. The high band is great for killing those high frequencies which have no business in a kick drum, so I'll set it to 8K and cut it by about 8 dB or so. And of course, the EQ also sounds good on a snare. The low band is great for getting rid of any muddiness you might have in the snare, so I'll set the low band to around 200 Hz and then cut by around 8 dB or so. The low midband is great at cutting mid-range rings, so I'll set mine to around 1 kilohertz or so. Give it a quick sweep, and then give it a nice cut. Now I want to bring out the character in the snare, so I'll use the high midband to give it a boost, and I'll switch it to vintage mode since I'm boosting. Search for the sweet spot around 4K, and give it a substantial boost, maybe 5 or 6 dB. Finally, with the high band, I want to set that to around 8K to kill any high-end rasp, and then give it a cut by around 8 dB or so. Perhaps the most underrated processor of the PX-64 is the delay. It sounds great, syncs to the host tempo, and works on all kinds of drum and percussion sounds. For example, when setting the time to a dotted 16th, you can get a great dub snare sound. You can also get a really cool buzzy sound, which also works great on rim shots, by setting the time to 30-second triplet and cranking up the feedback. But I like that dotted 16th dubby sound, so I'll reset it for that as I go over the rest of the controls. Turning up the level control will only affect the delayed signal, as will the filter mode, which is basically an EQ just for that delayed signal. You can change it from a high pass to a bell curve to a low pass filter. And the cutoff adjusts the frequency of the filter, which again only affects the delayed signal. The smooth amount is like having a transient shaper just on the delayed signal, which gives the delayed sound more or less attack. The delay is also great on percussion sounds, like a shaker. It can take a very basic pattern like this and turn it into a much more interesting rhythm. Adjusting the time to 16th note will add some on-beat echoes, and tweaking the feedback will give you the desired number of delays. Finding the desired sound is really just a matter of fine-tuning the level of the delays and the amount of feedback you want. Moving between the different filter types really changes the characteristics of the shaker. With the filter mode set to low pass, the shaker delays will sound more natural, and setting the smoothness to a softer attack will also make them sound more realistic. The PX-64 is also useful on the drum bus. The tube saturation is a great way to warm or even distort your drums. Turning the output gain down and the input trim up will let the signal hit the saturation harder without becoming too loud. Increasing saturation changes the character from warm to extreme. PX-64's compressor is also at home on the drum bus. For a heavily compressed, pumping drum sound, crank the ratio up high, or for a more even, gently compressed sound, turn the ratio down. Then dial in the amount of compression you want with the threshold. Thanks for checking out Go Deeper PX-64. For Cakewalk, I'm Seth Pearlstein, and I'll see you in the next video.